And
I really,
the conversation, as you could probably tell, was a lot of like new dad stuff. It
Yeah.
was a lot of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
water cooler new dad stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shows,
Yo,
a lot of
are
Miss
you
Rachel
sleeping? Are you
conversation.
sleeping?
Yeah.
Are you
What's the
Yeah.
sleeping?
sleep training like? What's
Yeah.
the crib to bed transition like?
Yeah.
What's the gear? We're very gear focused
Yeah.
on that set.
So
John,
You can hide
John,
who you really are.
John.
sounds good. Nigeria Chambers from the Culture Collective. James, Chris, and Michael, thank you so much for your time today. And congratulations on your latest series, The Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy, streaming right now on Peacock. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
very well, thank you.
Well, man.
Doing
Amazing.
good.
Well, there's one thing the audience, they speak and they're very vocal for whatever their outlets may be. And I say congratulations to you all because as a critic, deemed this to be a great and fantastic show, so did the audience viewing it. Because you also
That's right.
know with our sort of American infatuation with true crimes, if there is ones that we don't like, they also speak very loud about that. And then you take that for however you want to take that. But was really the reason I bring that up is because what I was quickly fascinated by this is that we all know that this case has been revisited countless times. But what this one does very special is it sort of flips the script on things. We're working through empathy, which is something I tried my whole life through, and we focus it on the victims of this monster. And instead of and doing that, instead of sort of sensationalizing the monster himself, which we have seen people do so in terms of glamorizing these people that shouldn't have that platform. I want to know for you all, whether you realized it before filming or recognized it afterwards. Can you talk about, was there something special about the approach in terms of crafting this series, these characters, and then ultimately with the finished product? And I guess we'll start with you, Chris, please.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, all three of us had conversations with Patrick before we began shooting about the approach and about the goal of highlighting the stories of these victims. I mean, part of the reason that John Wayne Gacy was able to kill as many people as he did was because these people were ignored and their families were ignored, and it for whatever reason, whether they were perceived to be a part of a section of society at the time that was neglected, whether it was systematic homophobia or whatever the thing was. The three of us and Patrick all knew that the only way to kind of reverse that, or to attempt to combat that in the telling of this story, was to focus on the stories of these young lives that John Gacy had taken.
Absolutely. Let's go to you next, James.
I told Patrick the moment I met with him, I was like, man, you're about to go on a really tough journey, and I don't envy you. And then by the end of the phone call, I was like, oh no, I might be going on this journey too.
Yeah, yeah,
And and are you willing to go there? And I think, the gravity of it, and this is probably a good thing, the gravity of it would hit me while the cameras were rolling. There would be
Mm,
moments when we were doing scenes, and like Chris was talking about earlier, that scene we did in the house, um, where you'd just be listening to another actor and it just kind of hits you and it comes alive. And I think, at least for me, kind of playing the investigator who's learning all this stuff in real time, um, it works creatively, but it was, it it's very rare that you have that experience when you're filming and you realize that these words have that much impact and that much power as written, and that this story has that much impact and power, and I'm proud of this. I'm proud of this job and the way that I think everyone approached it, and maybe we pulled it off.
Fully agree there, brother. 100%. And we'll round off with you on that question, Michael.
From a purely anecdotal, personal perspective, I auditioned for Patrick and then I spoke with him and I understood his approach in terms of this show was going to focus on the victims and their families. That was in the script that I read, and that when I read all of the scripts, that was also indicative of in the scripts. And I also knew that he had reached out to the victims' families. I also knew he was working with GLAAD. There was what he said, and then there was what he was doing, and then there was representation in the writers' room, and there was representation on set, and um, there were small choices that he made, small and large choices that he made, and then it was just a trickle down effect. This entire show and the job itself, there was a very sensitive and caring and mindful approach to how this show was being made and to why this show is being made. And I think that was just I think that was inherent in each and every choice that was made. And because when I was cast, I was faced with the fact I had just had a baby. My wife and I just had we had a 1 month old baby, and to go and do this show in particular, to be away from my brand, from my month old daughter for 6 months telling this story, there had to be a real good reason at the other end of that. And, I've been working for 30 years, so just going off to do a job felt not irresponsible, but just unnecessary. And so I had to really understand what I was going off to do. And like Badge said, I'm just so proud of it. I'm just so proud of the responsibility he takes on, the mindfulness and the approach and the awareness of it. And yeah, I think it just does something that it set out to do, and I think that comes from Patrick McManus.
Yeah, again, you all should be, including Patrick, should be completely proud of the product here. And regardless if you believe me or not, like I told you, the world speaks. And, people have access to the internet, and they're very vocal about how they feel. And there was definitely one prominent show in terms of true crime and murder mystery that got it right. And I'm sure that the families and the survivors of the families of the victims, I'm sure they also had nothing but great things to say. But I do want to kind of focus on the three of you all a little bit personally here, because when you have a show that dives into like this proximity of evil and how it affects ordinary people, and this is not just the victims, but like those investigating, those defending the killer. When you're portraying men that had to look Gacy in the eyes, I wanted to know not only how did you approach exploring the psychological cost of that closeness, but did any of it linger longer with you after the filming? And I really think the most important question I want to ask to all of that, and probably the simplest way of putting that is, what was the measure of self-care? What was the measure of, was there acts of therapy? Was there acts of R&R needed after filming this? Was there camaraderie amongst you all, group chats or hanging out or anything? Michael, you talked about a little bit about like the importance of this and that sort of, mildly responsibilities. But like after it's all said and done in this rap, what was sort of those lingering feelings beyond the fact in terms of putting it out into the world? And I will start with you on this one, Michael.
Again, just from a personal point of view, totally anecdotal, but I live in Los Angeles and we shot this in Toronto. and this shot over 6 months, and there's a lot of the show that I'm not in. So I was able to fly back and forth. So for me, it's not the kind of show that there's so much material, there's so much research that was done and that was handed to us. And, Sam wrote a book. There are many books written about Gacy and the victims, but also there are podcasts, there's documentaries. And as an actor, it's sort of like, where do you start? And once you do start, once I started, I realized that this wasn't the kind of subject matter that I could just listen to while washing dishes at home with children running around. And so there was a real pencils down mentality for me in terms of when I was on my way to Toronto, I was going to work and my headphones were in and I was reading and I was writing and I was listening. Oh, that's when I really allowed myself to consume. But then when I went home, I allowed myself to be home, and it's sort of almost akin to Gabriel's character in the show with the peso, where you put it down when you when you walk in
Yeah.
your home. But there is a certain amount of we were all super aware of that, and we were all, I think, most concerned with Chernus, who had to be there the entire duration of filming and was alone for a lot of that time. But for me, it kind of hit me once I was wrapped, once I was finished. That's where I think we shot episode 8 last, so there was Sam stuff that I shot last where he's kind of isolated, and you understand the consequences of what he did and the choices that he made, and he has a new wife, and he's a judge now. And then he gets that call from Gacy, and it all comes flooding back to him. And I think there's a certain amount of guilt and remorse and grieving that he's doing for what he did, and for the families and the victims. And I think it was in that state that I left with that really affected me. And that it's not that it didn't affect me, but you kind of have these blinders on, and you just get the job done, and you're just doing a job. And I think, I don't know, again, anecdotally for me, but I was left with that taste in my mouth, and it took a while to shake, so to speak.
We'll come to you, James.
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, we've all worked these jobs where you go to work for 12 hours a day, and then everyone goes to the bar afterwards, and you drink it all away, and that wasn't this job. That wasn't this job at all. I have two young children. Also, Chris has two young children. I think we spent all our paychecks on plane tickets and childcare, and there was this real separation for me also, just like Angarano. Like I went home and I didn't touch this stuff. And I live in New York, so I was doing. It's a quick, easy, cheap flight, 1 hour back and forth. I get to the airport, man, and this becomes my world. And it envelops you. And I personally like living and working in that isolated headspace. I'm okay with that. And I think, our R&R happened on set. Our R&R happened while we were shooting. We didn't go back to the trailers and isolate at work. I mean, I remember a day with Michael and Sully and Chernus, where we were doing a poor man's process in the car, and there was something wrong with the vehicle, and we had to change out vehicles, which took about 3 to 4 hours. And the four of us sat there for 3 or 4 hours just talking. And we just simple, had the best time. And sometimes we were just silent with each other, but all that actually mattered. And if you talk about like self-care and the therapy, that was our therapy, because there was a genuine care for each other as human beings for what we were about to do. And especially Chernus, because he's not that guy. And you meet Chernus when the cameras aren't rolling. That is a different man. And we cared deeply about that man. And then the cameras would roll, and you'd see what is coming out of him. And you're hearing this and watching this, and you can see his eyes. And inside, you're feeling for that. It's hard to separate it, because I'm like, man, there's this part of me that's like, yo, man, you're a monster. But I also know the man behind it. And I'm trying to get him through this also. We were all kind of caretaking each other.
And we'll round off with you, Chris, please.
Yeah, we definitely had our cast text chain. We'd get together with each other for dinner when we could. It's when these processes are so dark, it's nice to put each other in a different context, in a lighter context or in a more pedestrian context. But again, most of the concern was around Chernus, who was living this life at work, but also steeping himself in it outside of work to prepare for that. And it was a great deal of preparation. So it was important to go catch him on an off day and go for a walk, or go over to his house and sit on the floor with his daughter and play with toys, or go to a park, or get a cup of coffee or whatever it is, just to kind of remind each other of our humanity, so that the process doesn't feel like it's ongoing all the time. It's a kind of weird fever dream. Yeah, I feel like we struck a good balance of keeping things light and taking care of each other.
And
really,
the conversation, as you could probably tell, was a lot of like new dad stuff. It
Yeah.
was a lot of like,
Yeah.
water cooler new dad stuff.
Yeah.
Yo,
Shows, a lot of
are
Miss
you
Rachel
sleeping?
conversation.
Are you
Yeah. What's the
Yeah.
sleep training like? What's
Yeah.
the crib to bed transition like?
Yeah.
What's the gear? We're very gear focused
Yeah.
on that set.
So anytime we weren't traveling or preparing, we were sleeping.
Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate the time, the answers, the safe space here today. I really, really appreciate it. And congratulations once again on this project. Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy, streaming right now on Peacock. Michael, Chris, and James, thank you so much for your time and congratulations.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
spreading the word.
Thank you. Thanks for
Absolutely.
having us.
Absolutely. Take care.